All right. So I'm going to show you here in a minute what the problem is. The biggest problem is in owning a vehicle with a computer controlled setup like this multiplex system, or any new car now that's made works on the same principle. So our friends at Thomas Bus, when they put this wiring in, instead of running it behind here and coming out this hole that they already had rubber around, and then have the wire come out here and run down, they had it come down here and across, and it just put a whole bunch of stuff in the, I mean, it's a pretty big wire bundle right here out in the open, right? And I thought, well, let me see if I can just unhook this stuff. Most of it is all this bundle, which is for controlling my mirrors, which I've already had out anyway. So then there's a couple of ground wires in there, and then there's two dome light wires. I've already pulled out the dome light wires. The driver's dome light and then the passenger dome light. And so I've got, there was one wire that was this one right here, this brown one, which is for lights. And it was connected to another brown one over here, so they couldn't be separated. And then it was connected to a single brown wire that went over and ran into the back of this cluster, and I'm calling it a cluster. So I needed to break that wire somewhere, so I decided to just pull the wire out of the connector, and I was successful in doing that, and everything was cool. Here's the wire. And actually, it kind of turned out that I didn't really probably have to take this wire out of the connector anyway, because I ended up still having to cut the wire. When I traced it back, they were tied together up here. So not a big deal. I'm just going to splice those back together. They're all dark brown. Those are the only dark browns over there. And then there's one more wire holding me up here. It's this one right here. Is this the one? Yeah, I think this is the one. This tan with a white. So I thought, well, I could just cut this wire and splice it back together again, and then I'll be good to go to get all this stuff, put it in the loom, and then run back behind there and down nice and neat. But I thought, well, geez, let me just see if I can undo this connector that goes to the floor right there, where that green big old connector is with the red on the inside. So if I can do the same thing here, is unhook this and pull the wire out of the connector, I can just remove that one wire and unscramble the mess. I mean, see, there's all kinds of stuff that's just crisscrossed, like that purple one going in between that, you know what I mean? So I'm unscrambling all that, but here's what I found. The pins are all corroded up. So this has been getting water in it. Of course, the bus has been leaking probably since the day they made the damn thing. So I don't know what these circuits do. That's my problem right now. If I knew what all these circuits did, and maybe I can determine that none of this stuff is that important, I could just cut all this stuff out of there, right? But it's probably got to do something, because I've pretty much already removed everything that's on my list of stuff to remove. Now what's interesting is there are two blue wires right here for that fan that doesn't work, and I'm seeing that. Let's see, does any of them go there? looks like, yeah, one of them goes to that plug, and another one is going up there. So what I'm thinking is one blue wire is getting controlled by this module, and another blue wire is getting controlled by another module that's at the other end of that thing. So it's telling me that there's probably inputs and outputs going through here that are toast. So I can't work on this anymore tonight. I'm too darn hungry, hot, I'm sticky. I don't even like the way I smell. And I'm at a pretty good stopping point. I think what I'm going to do though is reinstall this dark brown wire back into that connector so I don't forget that, which that would be an easy one to remember, but it'd be one thing I can do now. And that puts all this back pretty much whole again. And so I guess you could see here what I've done is I've repackaged this all back together, and all the cut wires, I put labels on everything. Pretty much everything's got a label on it, and then I just tie wrapped it all back into place just to get it to where it's in place. So there's a wire I took out of here that I disconnected, pulled the terminal out of the connector. I got to figure out which one that was, and yeah, that I just did that a moment ago because this is tied into. I know which one this one. This is the power supply wire for my electric mirrors. That's what that is, and that wire is down in this bundle somewhere, down there. So yeah, and these there's a bunch of ground wires here, all these whites, that they were all grounds tied into this. And just to make my life simple, I just cut every one of them, right? And I'm going to reconnect them later. They're just grounds for my front marker lights that are up in here. And I want to get the twist out of it, you see? I can't deal with this twisted up rat's nest shit. I want to get the twist out of it and make everything run nice and neat. This goes to marker light that's right on the side there. There's 5 of them. There's a marker light there, 3 in the middle, and 1 over here. That's all that's up here, right? Electrically. I got 5 marker lights, this mess of wires for my mirror control on that side, and a dome light, which I've already pulled the dome light out. So there's my 2 wires for my marker light on that side, and all the rest of these are my mirror control. So you got up, down, left, right, you know. I'm not going to try to figure these things out. I had that mirror apart when I painted it. I had to take the whole thing apart. So I kind of know what's in there. There's 2 motors. One that tilts it up and down and one that tilts it left and right. So that should be 4 wires. And then there was a wire for an optional light if you had a light in there, and then a ground wire. And then I'm drawing a blank on this extra one, but I don't need to know what they are as long as I just reconnect them all. But it's coming together. It's looking pretty good, man. I mean, I just got this to put back together again. And this is just plugging that back in up there. There's nothing disconnected here except for 1 wire. And then there's that with about 6 wires. That I'm probably going to end up taking that big green monster plug out of there and taking the wires from behind that and splice them to these wires on that plug and find some way of closing that hole off. I mean, if they would have given me extra pins, I could have just put them in new spots, but they only gave us enough pins for the connectors that they put in there. So, and I don't know where the hell to get those pins, so that's what's going to happen. I might, you know what I might just do is just drill a hole through that thing and then put all the wires through, you know, pull them through and then solder them all together. something of that nature. I'll figure something out. That's an easy thing to do. It's getting exciting. Look how nice and clean all. There's no wires. Just those spares right there. Everything else is tucked away. I'm probably just going to cut those spares out. I don't know. I don't think I need them for anything. Alright, so I've been getting phone calls every time I make a recording. It cuts me off. I'm going to share what I've done so far. So we've got this well organized and temporarily tied off. I got my grounds fixed. These grounds fixed from the rear anyway. I put a crimp eye, or a ring terminal like a lot of folks call them, and covered that with heat shrink. This is the ground from my fan that I got running. That's just temporary for now. All the rest of these are going to be removed. I've got these grounds that come from the front, the marker lights and all that good stuff. This is not going to get hooked up. This is a lighting circuit that went out to the mirrors, and there are no lights on the mirrors. Those are unused circuits. I began organizing this area here. I put this loom on this bunch of wires. I've got to tape that up and put a small loom over that marker light wire. I'm all out of pretty much every kind of loom I've got. I've only got, geez, I used my last large piece down there. I'll show you that in a minute. Well, there's some stuff in there, but none of the big stuff. This is the remainder of my large wire looms. Down here, I've got this pretty much completed. I was underneath this guy, and I remembered that the original bus wiring had this "don't leave your child in the back of the bus" warning system thing that I cut out, and it was this little red wire, that red wire, and this yellow wire. These butt splices were in there when I got the bus, so the guys who installed that, they were the ones that hacked all that stuff. And there was a ground wire too, and they tied into this ground wire instead of just sticking it underneath the bolt head. Anyway, so after I clean those up, I'll probably put a little time in these wires here to make those look a little better. Plug this back in, make sure I don't have any twist in it. This is the antenna wire that's coming from the radio on the dash. That'll eventually get pulled out. For now, that's just going to hang there. This is the air line for my air ride seat. That's going to stay and be reconnected. I've got it capped off temporarily. These two wire looms are all a bunch of wires that I have removed from the bus and cut off, and I've put heat shrink tubing over the ends of them, and like that. Put a piece of heat shrink on there so nothing can short on the end, and I labeled them like I've done here, right? So in case there's any instance where I may want to use one of these wires for anything, I've got options. If I wanted to run something off a chassis battery, there's all kinds of interesting things going on there, like switched grounds. Oh, there's a couple more. Here's some switched grounds for the two switches for the rear dome lights. So if I need a switched ground for something, which is kind of weird, but that's why they made the bus. And I got backup lights if I want something energized when I put the bus in reverse. I've got that. I've got two wires that come on with ignition that fed power to the rear dome lights, and I've got one wire that gets power when I activate the door entry solenoid. I think that just comes on with ignition. I remember whenever I turned the key on, you would hear air power. So actually I think that's just an ignition, a fused ignition. So I got 3 fused ignition wires here. There are separate wires for the door open and door close solenoids, and they're in here and they're labeled. So we're just about done. Just about done. I've got a mystery wire here. I'm not sure what's going on with this guy. I think This may have pulled out of a plug that was behind the computer module. This guy. Or it was never connected to anything. If I look really close, maybe I'll be able to... It doesn't look like there's any sticky stuff on the terminal, like it was taped. Although there's a little bit of crud right there, like it had tape on it. So what I'm going to do is reconnect this one wire that I know I have to reconnect. I cut it. This feeds a wire that goes to both mirrors. And this one is what? Rear accessories. This is a spare wire I left in the bus. It runs all the way to the back end up at the top over there. And it was identified as rear accessories or accessories something or other back there. So I left it, and I can hook this up to a fuse circuit or anything else I want. So for now this is going to stay disconnected. So for the remainder of today, or not going to take the whole day, but the remainder of this, I'm going to be using tie wraps and electrical tape and organize this into a nice path along where these original plastic keepers are. I'll yank these out and reuse them, or I've got some new ones. I'll probably use new ones. So that wire will flow nicely across there. And all we're going to see is I'm going to have to get some more of that really large wire loom. There's a piece of that wire loom going up and meeting this. I might be able to squeeze enough out of that large piece and that not so large piece right there. We'll see. Hopefully I got enough for that. That'll be nice if I can get this closed up and kind of get out of my head as something I need to worry about. Then of course I'm going to crank it up and test everything and make sure it all works. It should be fine. Should be fine. There were only a couple of close calls where I cut something and had to reconnect it back. One of these pink wires was one of them. It's in here. I was pulling on one end and I saw it at the other end move, so I cut it. Then I realized it was tied into another pink wire, and it was a pink wire that needed to stay. It was that little junction guy right there. That thing. There's 3 wires on it, and all 3 of those wires go nowhere. So those are the ones I cut out. And inside this tube, it's just got a label on it identifying it as unused, since I don't know what it is. So yeah, looking good. So this is great. I was pulling the tape off of this butt splice and the damn wire just fell right out of it. I wonder what in the world was not working correctly. Okay, so here's something you're not supposed to do. This butt splice connector is insulated, and the technician that crimped it used a tool for non-insulated connectors. Let me show you what I mean. See right there? Non has got the spike in it. Right there. And insulated is just smashes it on both sides. That's the right tool for the job. Okay? So I was just getting ready to come over here and see if I could uncrimp this by squeezing it the opposite direction. And I kind of doubt I will, since they use the one with the spike in it. But I'm going to give that a try. Otherwise I'll just cut a piece out and solder in a new one. I actually have an abundance of red wire with a white stripe. When making a splice, I strip about 1 inch or maybe a little less than 1 inch of insulation off, and I don't twist the wire before twisting it onto the next piece. I'm not going to be able to show you me doing this, but I'll show you what it looks like after I twist it together, then when I solder it, and then when I put the heat shrink tubing on it. Okay, there's the wires twisted together. Make it nice and flat. You don't want any points sticking up, because once you solder it, those points can poke through your electrical tape or your heat shrink tubing. Okay, there's the soldered joint. It's still kind of warm. I'll let that cool a little bit more, and then I'll put the heat shrink tubing and slide it up there, and I think I'll go ahead and put the heat to it and shrink it, and then the other side of this I'll reconnect a little bit further away, just so it's easier to work with. Video here. There's my heat shrink tubing. I slid it in place. Now I'm going to put the heat to it. This is kind of hard to do looking through the camera. Really can't see what I'm doing there very well. There you go. Sealed up tighter than a crab's behind. I got my second splice twisted together, ready for solder, and I got my heat shrink tubing slid up here so it won't start to shrink from the heat of soldering. I'm going to go ahead and solder that and put the heat shrink tubing on it like I did above, and I'm going to repeat this operation for all the other pore connections that are in here. Alright, so there's a completed repair. Now this blue one was in my way and it needed to be repaired, so I thought I would do that one next. Some of the guns didn't leave me much room to work with. I got to connect that little nub down to here. Alright.